Welcome to the City of Windom, September 19th council meeting. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, welcome once again, everybody. Tonight we have first on the agenda is the consent agenda, which includes the minutes of the following: council minutes of September 5th, Telecom Commission August 14th, Street Committee August 31st, Community Center Commission September 11th, ADA September 11th, Planning Commission September 12th, Library Board September 12th, and the Utility Commission on September 13th. Also included are licenses and permits, and these are exempt gambling permits: Windom Women of Today, October 24th, and Windom Fire Department Relief Association, April 27th. Also included are the regular bills. Council wish to take action or have any questions?
I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
I'll second it.
Motion Scott, second by Dennis. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item, and most importantly, we have the swearing in of police officers. And so, first of all, we have Officer to-be Hunt Braun. If you would please stand up here and we will read the pledge, or the I think it'll catch you. Okay. So if you would please read the oath with your right hand upheld.
As a Minnesota law enforcement officer, my fundamental duty is to serve mankind, to safeguard lives and property, to protect the innocent against deception, the weak against oppression or intimidation, and the peaceful against violence or disorder, and to respect the constitutional rights of all to liberty, equality, and justice. I will keep my private life unsullied as an example to all, maintain courageous calm in the face of danger, scorn, or ridicule, develop self-restraint, and be constantly mindful of the welfare of others. Honest in thought and deed in both my personal and official life. I will be exemplary in obeying the laws of the land and to the regulations of my department. Whatever I see or hear of a confidential nature or that is confided to me in my official capacity will be kept ever secret unless revelation is necessary in the performance of my duty. I will never act officiously or permit personal feelings, prejudices, animosities, or friendships to influence my decisions, with no compromise for crime and with relentless prosecution of criminals. I will enforce the law courteously and appropriately without fear or favor, malice, or ill will, never employing unnecessary force or violence, and never accepting gratuities. I recognize the badge of my office as a symbol of public faith, and I accept it as a public trust to be held so long as I am true to the ethics of the police service. I will constantly strive to achieve these objectives and ideals, dedicating myself before God to my chosen profession, law enforcement.
Officer, if you subscribe to the Code of Ethics that you have just read, and if you do swear that you will uphold the Constitution of the United States and the state of Minnesota, and that you will fairly and impartially enforce the laws of the United States and the state of Minnesota and the ordinance of the city of Windom, and that you will conduct yourself at all times so as not to create disrespect for yourself and the position you hold as a police officer of the city of Windom, will you please state, "I do swear"?
I do swear.
Officer, I hereby install you, Officer Andrew Knitz, as Officer Hunter Braun. I'm sorry.
No worries.
I hereby install you, Officer Hunter Braun, as an officer of the Windom Police Department, signed by Dominic Jones, Mayor, City of Windom. Congratulations and welcome aboard.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everybody. Very good, and it's become a habit of mine that you have to say a few words to family or friends that you have out here in the city council.
I'm just happy to be here. Thank you all for hiring me. Thank you to my partners that are here. Yeah.
Very good. Okay, thank you so much. Steve, does he get this copy or is this yours? Okay. Now it's time for Officer Andrew Knetz. And please raise your right hand and read your oath of office, please.
As a Minnesota law enforcement officer, my fundamental duty is to serve mankind, to safeguard lives and property, to protect the innocent against deception, the weak against oppression or intimidation, and the peaceful against violence or disorder, and to respect the constitutional rights of all to liberty, equality, and justice. I will keep my private life unsullied as an example to all, maintain courageous calm in the face of danger, scorn, or ridicule. Develop self-restraint and be constantly mindful of the welfare of others. Honest in thought and deed in both my profession, my personal and official life. I will be exemplary in obeying the laws of the land and the regulations of my department. Whatever I see or hear of a confidential nature or that is confided to me in my official capacity will be kept ever secret unless revelation is necessary in the performance of my duty. I will never act officiously or permit personal feelings, prejudices, animosities, or friendships to influence my decisions. With no compromise for crime and with the relentless prosecution of criminals, I will enforce the law courteously and appropriately, without fear or favor, malice or ill will, never employing unnecessary force or violence, and never accepting gratuities. I recognize the badge of my office as a symbol of public faith, and I accept it as a public trust to be held so long as I am true to the ethics of the police service. I will constantly strive to achieve these objectives and ideals, dedicating myself before God to my chosen profession, law enforcement.
Thank you, officer. And if you subscribe to the code of ethics that you have just read, and if you do swear that you will uphold the Constitution of the United States and the state of Minnesota, and that you will fairly and impartially enforce the laws of the United States and the state of Minnesota and the ordinances of the city of Windom, and the ordinance, and that you will conduct yourself at all times so as not to create disrespect for yourself in the position you hold as a police officer of the city of Windom. Will you state and raise your right hand, I do swear?
I do swear.
I hereby install you, Officer Andrew Knetz, as officer of the Windom Police Department. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Once again,
I just want to thank the city, my family, and my partners who are here. And I'm here to protect and serve the community of Windom with my best ability. And thank you.
great job.
Yes, and I had to write this down because I don't want to get emotional, so I'm just going to read what I wrote. After recent events that happened so close to home, it really made me stop and think about our local officers and all they do each and every day that they put that uniform on. I want to express a huge thank you to each and every one of you for your dedication to keeping our community safe. And so I made a card and I just wrote a personal note to each one of you that I want to give out. Thank you.
Well done, Jenny, thank you. Next, we have department heads. Any department heads as of yet? Okay. We will proceed with the, we have a resolution. There's a bid award in your packet. This is the construction of the electric generation plant. Jason, are you going to give us a heads up on that and where we're at there?
Jason Sikora, Electric Superintendent. As the mayor said, I'm here tonight to recommend that the City Council approve the bid award to Wilcon Construction at the price of $5,563,762.48. The Utility Commission also recommended that we accept the bid, that the council accept the bid.
And I would just note here that you're really within about $100,000 on the two bids.
Yes,
I mean, wow, that's
Two-
close.
we had three bidders at the opening. Two of them filled out their bid form completely incorrectly. The third bidder did not fill all the columns in that we needed. But yes, these two are very close. The Joseph Company did just complete one project, so they were really familiar with what's going on right now in the industry and getting a building put up. So feel very comfortable that Wilcon came in right next to them and just a little less. So that's a good sign. Wilcon is also the ones that are putting up our truck garage, and they are doing a really good job to date on staying on schedule and making sure we're going to meet deadlines. So
That all sounds good. Council, we should act on that resolution awarding that to Wilcon Construction in the amount stated. Anyone care to introduce that resolution?
I'll introduce it.
Resolution introduced by Jenny, seconded by Jim. Any discussion on that? I forgot to ask, what was that pretty close to the estimated cost?
So the estimated cost originally was, I looked it up today, was almost a little over a year ago was the first estimated cost in July. At that time, the building was they just kind of shot us a building without having to do too much tear down, soil corrections and whatever, just kind of square footage and knowing what to do, so that it was the building itself at that time came in low, but they set a big contingency amount, not knowing what our soil corrections were going to be, what we were going to run into underneath. So after all the investigations, they kind of had set $1 million contingency to try because they really didn't know what they were going to run into. So the original estimate back then was $4,333,000. So with the soil corrections and some of the stuff they found, plus adding in, we ended up pushing into cold weather for some of the construction and having to deal with some of those, added to some of the costs, and then the inflationary. It's been a year since the estimate, so.
Yeah, we've been seeing some inflationary things hit recently too again. Okay, that resolution was introduced and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Nelson,
Yes.
Grunig, Esplin, Benson,
Yes.
Quaid.
Yes.
And that carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next, Todd Hagan is here. And he's going to take the hot seat and have a discussion on a bond issue. Well, we
Okay.
got to pay for the building, yeah, that we just awarded.
Yeah, show me the money, right? Okay. I'll try. So, Todd Hagan from Ellers and Associates. We've got another bond here, Series B bond, and Steve has the pre-sale report up in front of you. So this bond includes the electric generation building and the liquor store renovation projects at estimated bond amount of $7.23 million. So lots of components here on this. I mean, I'll go through my report, but since we've got the preliminary bond schedule up, we're seeing sort of three components to this bond issue. Okay, so an electric improvements and liquor store improvements are generally issued using a net revenue bond and not a general obligation bond. So with a reserve, they would probably require, and it would not be rated. So if we just did finance those projects with net revenue bonds, it would be very expensive to issue. So we are kind of getting into the bond law as best we can to try to find. We found a couple statutes that we can issue a general obligation bond from. So it's similar to like your street and like water and sewer type financings. We can get the city's general obligation bond rating behind these, and just with the volatility of the market and the way rates are jumping up and down, and the appetite out there for bidders to bid on bonds because they don't know what the future is looking like. We feel that issuing these projects with general obligation bonds over a 19-year period is the best way to go. We can put these out into the market competitively, again, with the city's bond rating behind it. So when we get on the call with Standard & Poor's for the bond rating on this, we'll definitely let them know that we are intending not to trigger any tax levies or any general obligation pledge, that these will be paid off with electric revenues and liquor store revenues. So Steve also had us on the liquor store, the liquor column right there. There's a issuer equity or cash contribution of $450,000, and so we kind of did the exercise of backing into a revenue constraint, to pay off these bonds at around $45,000 a year. I think was sort of where we targeted. So we kind of backed into that cash contribution to try to figure out what we needed to lower that bond down to get to that comfort level, I guess, for the revenues of a liquor store to pay for that part of the bond issue. So it's looking pretty good. I mean, we've got an estimated interest rate on this one, and we've got a lot of comps, for these types of bonds at about 4.5%, and we've added a cushion of 50 basis points or 0.5%. So we're hoping to get sort of in that area for the 19-year period. If you kind of scroll up to each individual maturity, you can see that inverted yield curve. If you kind of condense it down a little bit. So interest rates are a little higher at the beginning of the bond, and then they lower in the middle, and then they pop back up again. It's just kind of the way the world is right now. So it's a good time to go out long if you can, and that's what we're doing here. So we're trying to capture the average of all those individual interest rates we'll get, and they'll all be fixed like they always are, but they will be a little wonky. That's my new favorite word. That's sort of what they're gonna come in at, a kind of an odd sort of, instead of ascending perfectly like they used to in the olden days, which was just less than a year ago was the olden days. That's what we'll kind of get. So we're hoping for a nice low average rate on these bonds. Yes, and we did look at that. We want to squeeze the call, the prepayment feature as short as we can. So my analyst says 2033, I think, is the shortest we can go to start being able to prepay the bonds. We will try to see if we can get that shorter, but it's about a 10-year call now is what the market is looking at. So anything shorter, we're going to get nicked on the interest rates. So that means they'll be a little bit higher. And if we go out longer with the call feature, that is to nobody's benefit. So we want to make sure that call feature is set as well as we can to attract as many bids as we can and not have it cost the city a higher interest rate. Yep. So thanks for pointing that out, Steve. That's what we're looking at as well. These will be tax exempt bonds, not bank qualified, because we've got the hospital bonds coming too, and we shouldn't really, analyst is saying that there's not a difference between the BQ and the non-BQ these days. So another kind of odd nuance out into the market, but I think a perfect storm for Windom right now. I think that's good for you folks. That's sort of the explanation of the bond issue, and oh, by the way, we look at any refunding opportunities, and of course rates are kind of high, so we'll keep monitoring and let you know if there's any opportunities out there, but nothing right now on the horizon. So we've got 3 resolutions for you to consider as well, but I'll hold off on explaining those, and if you have any questions, I'll kind of yield to the council if you have any questions on the bond issues.
Any questions from the council? I will make the comment that it was kind of wonky, as you said. I haven't seen that before, actually. So,
Yeah.
So it would be good if we could pay that off in the middle sometime, really.
Yep.
Save some dollars on the end.
Yep, we'll push it as best we can. Again, we're in the market all the time with these types of bonds, so I think, we've got it pretty much narrowed down, but, when we get closer to sending out the marketing information, we'll make sure that if we can push it a little bit more, we will. If we can't, we won't, so we won't.
Could you hit on the tax abatement portion versus the equipment service?
Yep. So we've got 3 resolutions for your consideration. The first one is just our regular one, just authorizing Ellers to move forward, packaging this up, sell it in the market, come back on November 7th, Election Day, at a later time, 8:05, with the bids. And we'll put the best one on the top like we always do and make it easy. And that's what we'll do as far as the solicitation of the bond issue. But before that, we, in order to gain issuance authority under state law, we need to do a couple things. One is to hold a hearing, and that hearing is on the tax abatements is going to be October 17th. And so the electric building and the liquor store building, so the building portions of the bond issue will be issued under the tax abatement authority law, and that gives us the mechanism to issue general obligation bonds for the building portion of these facilities here. And tax abatement can be used in 2 ways. One way, it can be used like tax increment for, we've done a lot of tax increment here in Windom, and some abatement for new development projects. But also, tax abatement is also used for public facilities and public streets and those types of things, those types of projects. So what we need to do is, and I've already figured this out, so I'll get with Steve, and we'll need to pick certain properties in the city, I think, at or around these facilities, but we don't have to. There does not have to be a nexus or relationship benefit between the properties we choose and the facilities we're financing. So we can choose larger, more higher valued properties that we feel are not going to be in a tax increment district for 19 years, or we'll abate them again. So we can't abate them twice, and we can't put them in a tax increment district once they're abated. And so we're not picking on any parcel numbers in particular for anybody to be worried about. It's really just an academic exercise and a calculation that we need to make in order to facilitate the bonds. I think in practice, in practice, if we weren't going to use the revenues to pay the bonds, let's say it was going to be a tax levy, there would be tax abatements from each property tax and then a levy throughout the city. And what that ends up being is just a levy throughout the whole city to facilitate the payment of the bonds. So yes, we would be using their individual property taxes for that type of financing, but it ends up being a property tax from the whole city anyway, because we would just raise the levy, right? So on each individual property tax statement, every year you won't see a line item of tax abatement. But you would tax increment, but not tax abatement. So bear with us. We'll try to find the higher valued PIN numbers, the parcel numbers, so we don't have to publish a million of them. And if anybody has any question why my parcel number is on a public notice, call Steve, and then Steve can talk to me, or Steve can just talk to you and then not me. So that's the first. That's the first resolution, would be calling for a public hearing on that. The third resolution is an equipment certificate resolution. We've done this with the broadband equipment sometimes, just to kind of stay out of a pure revenue bond situation there too, to get a rating on some of the broadband financings that we do. And so the equipment portion of the electric generation building will be sort of financed under this statute. Because we're over 0.25%, that part of the bond's over 0.25% of the market value of the city. The council would need to pass this little one-page resolution, and this gets published in the paper, but there's no public hearing for that. Just publication, and then just waiting 10 days in hopes that we don't get a petition that somebody is questioning or dislikes the way we're financing this portion of the project. But I think it's to the benefit of the city. Well, I know it's to the benefit of the city. We're going to get much lower interest rates this way than we would with a pure net revenue bond for the electric facility. So that's the third resolution. No public hearing, but needs to be considered and adopted there too. So hopefully I'm explaining that a little bit. I know the tax increments is sort of a head spinner, but that's gaining a lot more popularity in the state, especially when financing that are like community centers or again libraries or some type of facility that we can't issue a general obligation bond for. So it does really come in handy, I guess, for public improvements like these. So,
Council, that was a lot of information. Do you have any questions?
You're glad I'm here, right? Oh,
Yeah, we
okay.
are.
All right.
As long as we get the low rates, we're glad you're here.
Yeah, and then I'll come back on, like I said, November 7th with the bids. But like I said, on October 17th, there'll be a public hearing in between. So.
Okay, Council, we have 3 resolutions, as I understand it. The first one, the resolution providing for the sale of GO bonds, Series 2023B. Is that sufficient enough? Okay.
I'll introduce that resolution.
I'll second it.
Resolution introduced by Dennis, seconded by Scott. Any discussion or questions? Hearing none, roll call.
Grunig. Esplin.
Yes.
Benson.
Yes.
Quaid.
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
And now will be the resolution calling for the public hearing.
I'll second.
Introduced by Jim and seconded by Scott. Any discussion or further questions? Hearing none, a roll call, please.
Esplin.
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Grunig. Benson.
Yes.
Quaid.
Yes.
And that resolution carries. Resolution determining the necessity to issue not to exceed GO equipment certificates.
I'll make a motion to accept the resolution determining the not necessary to issue the geo equipment certification.
I'll second.
Introduced by Scott, and that was seconded by Jim. Any discussion or questions? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Quaid,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Grunig, Esplin, Benson.
Yes.
Very good. Anything else, Todd?
That's it. Thank you very much. As always.
Take care, drive safely.
Yep,
All
thanks.
right. Okay, Planning Commission. You've been busy again.
Yes, we've been busy. Andy Spielman, Building and Zoning Official. So I've got a couple items in your packet this evening and on the agenda. The first is a preliminary plat for South Cottonwood Lake subdivision. This was submitted by DVK Diversified LLC and Semstone Concrete Materials LLC as owners of the property. The legal description is quite long, so I won't go through that, but the property address is 1405 Cottonwood Lake Drive. I think we're all familiar with this location. It's the former ready mix and gravel pit site just south of Cottonwood Lake. So we included in your packet a preliminary plat drawing. That drawing has been kind of back and forth a little bit, but what it shows is a residential subdivision. It consists of 3 blocks, block 1, block 2, block 3, and 3 outlots. I'll explain the outlots a little bit. If we get the map up. Yeah, it's coming. Next one, I bet. I don't know. Keep going then. Oh, okay. So it was included as a separate attachment. There you go. Thank you. So it's a residential subdivision, all residential lots, no commercial, no industrial, agriculture, anything like that. Outlot C is a small outlot way on the west side of the property. That's an area where the city has a current well. I think it's a production well. That's covered by an easement right now. We were kind of back and forth whether we just show that as an easement or not, but city attorney felt showing that as its own lot, that lot will be deeded to the city of Windom, and it will be our property with our well that's currently on it. If you scroll down a little bit, the large area right in the middle to the south is Outlot A. That outlot is to be dedicated to the city and reserved for open space. It's essentially their parkland dedication, but I don't think there's any thoughts of converting it into a park. It's going to be wellhead protection. It's going to be planted, I believe, with like native grasses, wildflowers, things like that. They are showing a future parking lot and a future trail down there, so the thought was to utilize that as kind of a nature area, walking trail kind of thing. That whole area will be the water retention. The storm water for the entire subdivision will drain there. And then Outlot B on the east is going to be deeded back to the EDA. Currently, there's no plans to subdivide that and build on that property. The water and sewer mains are going to extend across what they're showing as Cottonwood Lake Boulevard, but they're going to end at the east end of Cottonwood Lake Boulevard. They're not going to turn south to County Road 13. So since we're not providing utility services there, we shouldn't really show buildable lots there. So it'll be deeded to the EDA in the future. Possibly something could go there, but right now that's what that's kind of there for. With this, all of the lots in Block 3, which are the riparian lots, they do exceed the minimum lot size dimension. Actually, all of the lots in this subdivision meet the minimum requirements for single-family housing. There's been some question, and I'll touch on it a little bit, about 490th Avenue. Our research and city attorney agrees that that is a private road. It's covered under a private easement. DVK Diversified currently owns all of the land that the easement is on, and they own all of the land that the easement is benefiting. So that easement essentially is just terminated, it just disappears since they own and control all of the land. The city attorney did suggest that they actually file some sort of legal paperwork terminating the easement, but that's basically going to be terminated in 490th Avenue from County Road 13 to the north right-of-way line of New Cottonwood Lake Boulevard will be dedicated to the city of Windom in its current condition. The current condition that they're stating right now is a 22-foot wide gravel driving area. There's no plan to pave that through this subdivision process.
Andy, my question is, will the access for the other folks that are outside of city limits, that'll be used by them?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, no, not really.
No?
What I just described will not be, it'll be used by them, but that doesn't get them to where that road currently curves. So just north of the right-of-way line in lot 11 of block 3, they're showing a 35-foot wide by 104-foot long private easement. That private easement will be for access and utilities for the current residents of Lakeside subdivision. And you can see right where Steve is kind of flashing his cursor around now, those dotted lines actually indicate the driving portion right now. While we're there, the Public Planning Commission did hold a public hearing at their last regular meeting. We had one member from the public that spoke. That person is the adjacent property owner directly east of lot 11. Their concern was that if that area was vacated, that they would lose access to their driveway and the front door of their house, which faces west. If you look at aerial maps and you drive out there and look, they are clearly driving farther north than where that road curves. That was brought up. It was discussed quite a bit during the meeting. The Bob Braun, who is with DVK, was present for the Planning Commission. He did speak in reference to that. His explanation was that he did reach out to the realtor when the property was sold and wanted the property surveyed, wanted to make sure that the new buyers were very well aware of where the current property line was and that actually wasn't part of their property. Following all of the back and forth conversation, a lot of questions from the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is recommending that the City Council approve the preliminary plat. Their recommendation did come with, can you scroll to this side just a little bit, Steve? I want to catch that easement area, other way. Right there. So that kind of blow up right there is showing all of the utility easements. What they're showing is a 28-foot paved street, Cottonwood Lake Boulevard, that's edge of paving to edge of paving, in a 60-foot right-of-way. In addition to that, they're giving us a 15-foot, what they're calling now a drainage and utility easement along the street side of any property that's adjacent to and abuts the city street. The version of this the Planning Commission saw just said a 15-foot utility easement. Since the proposal is for an open ditch system with culverts, the city wanted that to be listed as a drainage easement, so it was very, very clear that that area is to be maintained for drainage. They're showing 5-foot side yard utility easements, 5 foot on each property, so 10-foot total, and then the same in the rear yards. Copies of the preliminary plat were provided to all department heads in the city of Windom. They were provided to Cottonwood County, since County Road 13 is adjacent to this, to the DNR, since this is in our shoreland division, CenturyLink and Minnesota Energy as additional utility providers, as well as Windom Ambulance Service and Windom Fire Department. To date, the only comments we received back was from the street department. As I said, they're what they're showing us here is essentially an open ditch type system. The street department would really like to see a curb and gutter of some type, longevity of the street, hold the street together, and then would like to see storm sewer for freeze-thaw conditions, and they're seeing issues with this type of design in other areas of the city. So the street superintendent, street committee's recommendation was for a curb and gutter and more of a storm sewer system. City code in our subdivision code states that open ditches will not be allowed unless specifically approved by the city engineer. City engineer has stated that he feels this design will work in this specific location. We're in the shoreland, and actually in our shoreland code, that would prefer a system that utilizes open ditches, water retention, water soaking into the ground, as opposed to man-made features to pipe it and direct it to a location. Outlot A and the depth of Outlot A, city engineer has said that this is basically the absolute perfect situation for stormwater. We're draining all of it to Outlot A. At the Planning Commission meeting, he commented that a lot of developers pay a lot of money to create a situation exactly like what we have here, especially with the soils being very, very sandy. Following all of that, as I said, the Planning Commission did make a recommendation for the council to approve the preliminary plat as presented, with the one change with the easements. That was bearing in mind the public comments that were made. That was deemed to be a civil matter between the two private property owners. We did meet with city attorney after that, just to confirm that the easement, as we're reading it, is in fact a private easement, that it doesn't benefit anything specifically for that lot. And his interpretation, again, was that it is a private matter, a civil matter between those two property owners, and that the city of Windom could approve the plat with the easement that they're showing for access to Lakeside subdivision. I think that I covered it all, but if you have questions, I would certainly entertain those.
So the recommendation is with open drainage, is that correct?
The recommendation is just as presented and as proposed and as shown. We really don't have a street cutout section right now, so unless you really zoom in and spend a lot of time looking at all these contour lines, you would never know that it was proposed for open drainage ditch.
Well, and my reason for asking is, I hope so, because it is different soil conditions out there. You mentioned the sand in the area. The drainage is all really going to a perfect location. How much drainage goes directly into the lake?
Less than what's going there currently now.
Yep, exactly. And I think that's a benefit to the lake, even though people would like to see the lake higher. Actually, that sand, it'll make its way there if there's a conduit with the sand that's there. So, no, I think that was a great explanation, Andy.
Yeah, the concern we have in the city engineer's recommendation was that the city be diligent in its enforcement of its regulations to maintain the ditch and the size of the culverts that go in there. The problem is that regulation doesn't exist. So calling that a drainage easement, we're hoping that that gives us a little bit more right to kind of keep that area open and clear. We're also going to ask that the engineer, when they do give us all of the utility design, street design, everything else, that there be a typical ditch culvert cross-section in there with the minimum size. And then trying to get some restrictive covenants on the parcels themselves so that we will see a minimum culvert size, and we can minimize the amount of culvert that we have. We won't have a property owner that comes in and wants to fill in their entire front yard area with a culvert. We need the ditch system to hold that water and kind of slow it down and let it soak in. So those are all things that we kind of talked about at staff level and at Planning Commission. So it's trying to move forward, so hopefully we're protected in the future.
Scott had a question, I believe.
I know along that house you were just talking about, there's a public access down in there. Is that been vacated, or is that gonna still become a public access down there for boat landing?
So our research shows that that's actually a private access all the way to the lake. We talked to DNR, if they had any kind of an easement there, they said they don't. So really all that's there, it was just a 66-foot wide private access all the way to the lake. That's covered under, as I said, the deeded easement that we found is a private easement to allow access and utilities to private property, and all of the property that's described in there is currently owned by DVK. It doesn't mention anything of access to the lake, and it doesn't mention any access to the residents of Lakeside subdivision.
Because I know when I was a young man, there used to be a public access. They actually had cement pillars going down so you could drop your boats and stuff right there. I mean, that's at one point that's where everybody got on and off the lake right there.
Yep. So you were actually going across somebody else's private property, essentially. Who was doing that? Who was maintaining it? Who installed that? I don't know, but it's private property that's owned now by DVK.
So the chief just heard that you admitted that you crossed private property.
There was a sign.
Okay.
Yeah, there's been a lot of research into that because nobody really knew what it was. It shows up in the Lakeside subdivision, which is the subdivision to the east there, but there's really no mention of it. It shows up again when there was potentially some land that was going to be plotted down by Cottonwood Lake, but that never followed through. I think the assumption was that it was a DNR easement, so.
I know they had a sign there for one, DNR.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, anything further? Okay, I believe would this just be a motion requested for approving the preliminary plat of South Cottonwood Lake subdivision?
Correct.
Council?
I would make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, the resolution is to accept the preliminary plat of South Cottonwood Lake subdivision. And that motion was by Jenny, second by Scott. Any discussion or final questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Next.
So the next item that I've included is it's actually a conditional use permit to allow a planned unit development in the Shoreland District. So what we just approved is a preliminary plat for South Cottonwood Lake subdivision. This application was submitted by same property owners, DVK Diversified and Semstone Concrete Materials. The request is to approve a planned unit development in the Shoreland District, and the reason being, when you're in the Shoreland District, there's certain density requirements that have to be met. The only way to increase those density requirements would be through a planned unit development. The planned unit development would cover all of Block 1, Block 3, and outlots A, B, and C. So we're basically talking everything that's on the south side of the new Cottonwood Lake Boulevard. This would be all of the non-riparian lots. There's a lot of code to get through, both city code, city ordinance, and DNR model code. What we're really trying to do is get down to what the base density is based on the minimum lot size. And I think I already misspoke once when I said we want to increase the density. That's not actually what we're doing. We're kind of consolidating a more dense area to one particular portion of this subdivision. And what's on the screen now is not the plat that was just approved. This is a previous version of it, but this is the version that I started working on. This really means nothing. It's just kind of a visual aid to show you how we come about the numbers that I'll talk about in a little bit. So what we do is we divide the shoreland district into 200-foot wide tiers. That's 200 feet away from the ordinary high water mark. That gives us a total area within each tier. From that, we have to subtract any unsuitable area. So kind of the light blue is tier 2. There's kind of a dark orange portion there. That's part of the riparian lots. I excluded all of that from tier 2. And then the kind of the lime green areas that I'm showing there, those are, those could be considered bluff areas. We have to exclude bluff areas from the suitable area as well. I would actually argue that these by definition aren't bluffs because they don't slope towards the water. But what I'm showing is an as conservative approach to this as I possibly can. I'm taking out all of the roadways. I'm taking out anything that because of the height and slope could be considered a bluff. And what that gets us to is what was included in your main packet, the density areas. So that gets us to a suitable area number. We divide that by the minimum lot size, which in all of our tiers is 10,000 square feet. That gives us a base density within that tier. So in tier 2, we have a density of 19.5. They're proposing 12 units. So we have 7.5 that we can transfer back into tier 3. In tier 3 is where we have lot 5 in block 1. They're proposing up to a 50-unit multifamily apartment. So that's kind of where we're transferring a lot of this density into that area. So tier 3, we have a base density of 26. If we transfer from tier 1, we get 34. The proposed 54 units is a combination of the 50-unit apartment building, a 2-family dwelling on lot 4 right there, and then the remainder of the lots would be all single family. So in that tier, we are negative 19. If we go to tier 4, we have a base density of 24, and in tier 4, we're actually proposing 0 because that's almost entirely covered by Outlot A, which is going to be dedicated to the city for open space. Tier 5 is the same way. So really, that's just a long way to say that the base density in the entire planned unit development is 89.25 units. We're only proposing 66. There's 2 columns that I've left blank in there. That's a bonus density factor. I didn't use it because we didn't really need it. If we did want to take the bonus density factor, we could add 50% to tier 2, 100% to tier 3, and 200% to tiers 4 and 5. That would get us a huge number, and we would be just a small fraction of what would actually be allowed for density. My calculations on the bottom there, the total area of planned unit development area, the total area of open space, which is lot A, that's why we get that, because we have a huge area. 59% of the planned unit development area is going to be deeded, dedicated to the city of Windom and reserved for open space. So with that, the Planning Commission held a public hearing. We did not have any comments at the public hearing regarding the planned unit development. And so the Planning Commission is recommending that the council approve the conditional use permit to allow a planned unit development in the Shoreland District, and also approve this specific, these specific densities as the general concept plan of that planned unit development. The next step for this would be development stage, and then the final step would be final stage. I anticipate both of those will come in at the same time, but that's kind of the process moving forward. So really what we're doing now is just approving this as a general concept to allow those units kind of in those locations in this planned unit development.
So the conditional use permit is what we're approving first, is that correct?
Correct. We could,
And the residential planned unit development, Is that all in one?
It can be all in one. The conditional use permit is essentially to approve a planned unit development in the South Cottonwood Lake subdivision, and then we're approving it as a general the planned unit development as a general concept stage, or general concept plan.
Can you write that motion, Steve, as he just stated?
Or do you want it to be two separate motions?
It's up to what's legal.
I've included it as one recommendation.
So I think the recommendation, as it's stated in the memo, to approve the conditional use permit for a residential PUD in South Cottonwood Lake subdivision would be the appropriate motion.
Do we have that appropriate motion?
I would make that appropriate motion.
Would you repeat it, please?
The motion is to approve the conditional use permit for a residential planned unit development in the South Cottonwood Lake subdivision.
Thank you. And do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Jim. That was made by Jenny, seconded by Jim. Any further discussion? It's been a long time to get this far on this project.
No, Andy, that would include the general concept, correct?
Actually, after they voted, I was gonna ask then for maybe another motion to approve the general concept plan, because I didn't hear it read in the
No,
motion.
it wasn't.
Yep. I
So
separated them.
let's,
Perfect.
okay. We'll vote on that motion as made and seconded. Any further questions? All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? And that motion carries unanimously with one absent. The PUD, the general concept plan, do we have a motion to approve that?
I'll make such a motion.
I'll second.
Have a motion by Scott, seconded by Jenny. Any further discussion, or do we need an explanation more on that? I think it was the same information you just shared. So with that, I'll call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? And that motion carries. Thank you. Thanks for the hard work of the planning and zoning again.
Thank you.
Okay, Annual Firefighters Relief Association report. Are the firefighters coming up to do that, or are we
you going to
going?
present, Ben, or do you want me to go through it and ask questions? Go
Ben
ahead.
has
Okay.
delegated Steve.
Okay. So the city council gets this annually. Once the Fire Relief Association audit is completed, there's a state form that gets filled out on the Relief Association, and what that is the independent mechanism that handles the firefighter pensions, okay? And so in your packet, you'll see what the financial projections are for the calculation of normal costs, what the projection of assets are, and essentially kind of the bottom line number is what obviously is the key factor. It's can they meet their obligations as they're shown. And in the information from the audit and the state report shows that they do have a surplus in that fund and are able to meet the obligations that are shown in the Windom Firefighter Relief Association documents. And so you can see there's some other additional information about the projected expenses, things like that, how much was received for fire aid and those kind of things. So, and then you can see the last line again is required contribution. If there was not, if there was an insufficient amount of funds, then that would be where the city's obligation would kick in. So this is shown as zero. So I believe the chief's recommendation and mine would be to take a motion to approve this report.
I'll make a motion to approve the annual Firefighters Relief Association report.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Dennis, for the motion, and a second from Scott. Any other questions? All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Good to see that the association is doing well in the relief. Okay, next is the preliminary 2024 budget levy resolution. That's what we've all been waiting for here. Steve, who are you looking for?
Cheryl.
Cheryl?
She's hiding.
Did she do this?
Yeah,
or-
no. So Cheryl will be here as a resource as well. I'll just walk you through it. The information in your packet. What we're recommending to the council is to set the preliminary levy number. That has to be done in September. So the number we're requesting the council set is a number of $2,564,542. That's just a 5.71% increase, which would then bring our levy additional dollars coming in of $138,424. As you kind of know in our process, what we do is we run 6 months financial, a couple of years of history. That information is provided to the department heads. They go through it, plug in what they see coming up in the year. They return those sheets back to the finance director and myself. We then sit down with the department head and go through everything line by line, and just to make sure that we're all on the same page as far as the dollars that are being requested. And then that information gets put back into our budgeting software, and Cheryl comes up with the numbers, and then we kind of go over it. And the numbers are in the rest of this packet that we've got in front of you. Just kind of like similar to some last year stuff, key factors in this are that, inflation continues. We see goods, services, and costs going up, fairly substantially over what we've seen in the past years. Fuel prices, you probably all saw in the last 2 weeks, we added 40 cents to the fuel price. And so we need to kind of hedge against that a little bit. Equipment prices and surcharges. For those of you that run the council, we ordered some snow plows a year plus ago. And I believe there were 2 surcharge kind of fees that got added to those in process. And so we're still waiting for delivery of those vehicles, but they're very close. So that's just an example of us seeing the equipment prices kind of going up. Health insurance, we did get our statement. Our health insurance for employees, it will go up 9.5% again. That was somewhere the same as last year. We've got that through the Southwest West Central Co-op, which is part of almost a statewide pool. Our workers' comp, liability, auto insurance, we get that through the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust. Depending on the type of insurance, they're saying somewhere between a 3 and a 10% increase depending on the type of insurance. They're saying too that when there's damages to buildings, getting those supplies, getting the labor, getting them repaired are being very costly, which is then putting pressure on the league's ability to pay out those claims. So they're looking at some rate increases there. Good news is that we did get an increase in state aids. Our local government aid, which is our main source, went up by $228,000. That will be in 2024 and in 2025 because the state budget's on a 2-year cycle. So that is the good news in this. A little bit of other good news in this is that we have seen, kind of counter to Mr. Hagan's comment, higher interest rates for our debt costs, but we also have higher interest rate that we're getting on some of our investments. So we're doing a little bit better on some of our reserve dollars being invested. So we put those into the budget too, which is, not a sustainable and for sure source, but we know what we're kind of doing with, the next 6 to 12 months out there. Lastly, we had, there would be no or very little small city street aid. The legislature did approve a mechanism to fund street aid. I did talk to the State Department of Revenue, and that is going to be a collection of sales tax from auto parts and things like that. So what they're doing is they're just starting that tax. So they will be collecting those dollars and then redistributing them the next year. So in 2024, they told us if we saw distribution at all, it would be very minimal. And so basically it will be a 25 number, but that formula will depend on how much sales tax they collect, how many people are in the pool. So they don't really even have runs on that yet. So we can't count on anything in 2024. So those are kind of some of the key stuff. I talked about American Recovery Plan Act, some ARPA dollars. As I mentioned, we had some snowplows. The city council funded those through that mechanism. We also had a couple of pieces of equipment for PD. We will have a little bit of dollars left out of there. So we can talk about that. Our capital plan, our CIP, that's for the tax-supported departments, either general fund or special revenue fund, like community center, arena, pool, those types of things. Last year, we spent about $303,000, I believe, in capital, so we tried to budget a very similar amount going into 2024. Because as we've seen prices go up on pickups or other things, we need to kind of keep up with that a little bit. So we budgeted this year what we spent last year. Debt service levy, these are ongoing debt payments we've got on street projects and other things that come from the debt levy itself. 500 and I think it was 553 last year. It's 551 this year, so very similar. We did not add any new general obligation debt. Yep, we're talking about the liquor store, the electric department tonight, talking about the hospital bonds that would be issued. Those are going to be paid for by the revenues of those entities. Yeah, there's some backing from the city so we can get a lower rate, but the revenues themselves will be paying that debt service, so they're not new debt services that will be added to the tax levy. General fund reserve, this is a number that you always kind of look at when we get into our budgeting discussion. Our policy is to be between 35 and 60%. Right now, we're looking at with the 24 budget as it sits, and taking off the things that we've already earmarked dollars for, like the cul-de-sac out by Dollar General or the floodplain study, those type of things. Taking those away, that puts our reserve at 46.5%. So we're still within our range, so we'll see where that ends up. Property tax, as I talked about, our preliminary ask is for 5.71%. Know that that is going to be then the max. It can always go down and council can cut that amount down, but we just can't go up from there. So this is kind of the high water mark. And with some of our budget discussions yet to have and one outstanding labor contract, a little bit of wiggle is, being requested here. Last year, we did go up 7.67%, but as you are aware, valuations of property went up considerably more than that if you've looked at the county assessor's numbers. So even with that up, our tax rate went down, and that's something that, that's been the council's goal for many, many years, is to stabilize and or lower our tax rate. And so even though our levy went up last year, our tax rate went down. We went from 0.71 to 0.64. So looking at kind of ahead of what's going to continue with the property valuations, we should probably be staying on that same plane. So without the new numbers, I can't tell you what it'll be exactly, but that's kind of been the goal, is to keep an eye on that tax rate. It's not so much the levy itself, it's the tax rate. And so that's why we're doing that. And new properties, of course, come onto the rolls. Quick Trip is new onto the rolls. There'll be new scooters that were coming, and those kind of things add to that pie, as well as the increase in the assessor's valuations. But so those are all things that we looked at. Just to kind of, I'm not going to go through all of these sheets, but we've got the projected general fund budget, where those revenues come from and what the expenses are for those tax-supported departments, special levy or special revenue funds. These are ones that generate some income but not enough to be self-sustaining. Library, airport, pool, ambulance actually is self-sustaining, but it's in the special revenue fund bucket. EDA, arena, and multi-purpose center, community center. And then we've got the enterprise funds. Those are business type of activities that are self-sustaining. Telecom, water, wastewater, electric, and liquor store. So what those projected budgets are, then it's the overall revenue for the city, general fund, enterprise fund, special revenue funds, what our debt service fund is, and then special projects. Those are our TIF activities, and dilapidated housing program is in that kind of special projects fund. And then, of course, the expense budget to match the revenue budget. And then this is a version of all those TIF, tax abatement type of things that we've got. You can see the revenues and expenses there, and which the revenues pay for the expenses, and that's what we want to see in that one. And then lastly, kind of looking at the levy, how we come up with the number. So we look at how much do we need for general fund operations, how much do we put into general fund capital, dilapidated housing program is in there, and then special revenue funds, how much do they need, how much tax support do they need to maintain their operations, a little bit of capital. That was an airport piece for some local match for that environmental review that we have already approved, so that's in there for $37.50. And then we have a tax abatement, and the way tax abatement works, it's the people pay it, then it comes to the county, and then it turns around and gets rebated essentially back to that property, but we have to assess it from them in order to get it back from them, so it gets added into our levy amount. And then our debt service, and so that comes out to this $2,564,542. And then this is just a breakdown of that debt service levy, which I also have on another page. Exhibit B is our capital improvement plan. These are the things that you will be asked for during your budget workshop meetings. They're broken down by department and year. Yeah, there's some very big numbers in there. Don't get overly concerned as we get through them, because there are different funding sources. You know, like some of the stuff for the airport and whatnot, you see big numbers in there, but a lot of those have FAA support of 90% and 5% state support in a lot of the cases. So ambulance, again, that are self-sustaining, electric, water, sewer are self-sustaining. So not all these are tax-funded improvements. So, but these are all the ones that will be presented to you in your budget workshop, and so please feel free to ask questions. Like I said, our debt service levy, this is where we're at. We've got our emergency services building. This is the amount that gets assessed to levy. We've got other mechanisms that are paying for other parts of that debt. We've got the ice system, which we did down at the arena 5 years ago now. And then 4 street projects. So those are what we're paying debt on currently. And then this is the general fund reserve estimate showing the numbers, what we've earmarked, some of the dollars for out of that fund, and then kind of what's remaining, and then,
What's
you know.
the total dollar amount with the,
Right now, the remaining reserve is $2,057,000, and that's 46.5% of our expenditure budgeted.
46,000?
Yep, correct. Yep. So, those are the pieces of how we came up with the preliminary budget and our recommendation to you. Cheryl and I are certainly willing to answer any questions you have about that. And
Steve, my question that I'll start with is, what was last year's increase amount?
7.67 was your final.
Okay. And I guess what I was just trying to figure out too is how big a part inflation really factors on this. You know, we're seeing it in all avenues. I know the council will want to do what they can to keep this down. You know, and I've often heard over the past 2 years, we're looking at a combination of 15%, you know, over a 2-year term that we've seen in inflation. And, you know, now we're sitting at, with the combination of those two would be 13. I know that we've been as conservative as we, I think as we can be. Yet we're looking at, you know, the recommendation at 5.71. I think that is, I thought it would be higher, to be honest with you, of what the recommendation was coming. I really did. After, and we don't have some things finalized yet. You know, there's the staffing, the insurance, all of these increases that are hitting us as part of this, and we have a ways to go with some of our work.
Some of our comparable communities, I know Laverne is over 16%. I believe it was Litchfield, they were the low on our list of comps, they were 249. So it's kind of in that range. Marshall, had set theirs, they're 9 point something. Worthington is well into double digits. I talked to Jackson this morning, they're gonna be higher than us. They told me that they started off their budget discussion over 30, and they're down into the teens right now.
And I believe the county acted on theirs today.
County acted on theirs today, correct? 6.675, I think, was the county that they sent for their
6.75.
preliminary today.
Right. So we're all in the same boat, the way it appears, but, so I'm actually happy to see a not to exceed percentage of 5.71, and also realize, as Steve has said, the tax rate that we talk about is, I believe, the important one to take a look at. You can have a levy increase, but not, and you still have the tax rate go down. And a lot of people do not understand that, and so, we want to make sure that we understand that when we go into budget negotiations, but, from my point of view, I'd support the 5.71 as a starting in top level. I think we'd be doing good at that. Council, your questions, comments?
With the High Life vacating the premises and all the people that left with it, is that any factored into our budget planning too? Because the money just ain't gonna be there, type of thing?
So the biggest impact you'll hear about is in the impact to the electric and wastewater utilities, because they were a very large customer. So we'll talk about that in those discussions with budget. So yeah, it does have an impact there. So with some of the state money that is coming, if we get those dollars in for the wastewater side and pay that private portion of, High Life's debt off, we basically have a break-even budget. So that's probably the best we can hope for there. Now on the electric side, we're gonna lose some of that, but we buy some power off the day-ahead market, which we probably, won't need to be able to do. And then we also have some contracted power that we can sell on the market. So depending on how the market for electric energy is, will dictate kind of where that fund, goes over the year, but that's an unknown at this point for us. Tax-wise, they were a fairly large taxpayer, but they were still under a TIF, and so they were getting most of those taxes rebated to them as part of the TIF. So from that standpoint, now we'll have an impact, but yet we don't know what that will be. After January 1, when the assessor reevaluates and revalues that property, that's going to affect that overall pie of how far you have to spread those tax dollars out over. And what that number is going to be, I don't know, and I can't tell you that.
I would also like to remind the council that we are receiving a state aid of $228,000 extra for 2 years. After that period of time, it's gone. I mean, it's not guaranteed that that'll continue. So, and that has been included in the budget calculations, correct, Steve? Okay. And so, we're I'm not looking forward to the day the city has to deal with replacing that 228. Do I think it's going to be all of that to replace? No, probably not. But I bet some part of it could be. But depend on the state spending and where they allocate it to. So I'll just ask the council, are you ready to consider the request would be to accept a 5.71% preliminary levy. Other comments?
I'm surprised too that the recommendation is that I thought it would be higher, just in looking at all the different added expenses, the costs just of going up. You know, we're still unsure on negotiations, on labor contracts, just everything that has increased. I'm just hoping that if we do vote not to exceed the 5.71, that we can make it. You know that, and I'm trusting you and Cheryl that you've run the numbers over and over and that you're pretty confident that we can stay in that. I don't know, my overall thought, I thought it was going to be higher. I mean, obviously I don't want it to be higher, but just to cover everything and make sure that we still can pay for everything and the increases, I think that this is very conservative to be the 5.71.
I just asked Steve a question to clarify, and I asked him how many dollars does that 5.71%? I know everybody would want to go zero, but that's only $138,000 to run a budget of what?
General fund budget is about 3.4 million, which is where the tax levy goes.
Other questions?
I mean,
We're all in this together, guys.
To answer Councilmember Quaid's question a little bit, you know, we did get the increase in LGA of $228,000. We're doing a little bit better in investments coming in. You know, we funded, you know, the dilapidated housing program, which I know the council likes, you know, but there's still a little bit of money in that fund, you know, so some of that had to shift. Again, it's only $20,000, but it's $20,000. We might have a little ARPA money yet left over if we do well in the trades of those trucks. We can then shift some of those capital costs to that ARPA thing and then maybe free up some other money. So we've got some ways, but I know we have a laundry list of capital projects that you would love to fund as well. So those are the discussions that this council is going to have, but that's where we've kind of built in some guardrails.
I guess I'm going to throw in one more thing. And I'd like a report on this just after this is completed, but I want to bring it up now because you know, Scott had questioned about High Life and that sort of thing. We still haven't seen anything from the state of Minnesota. Okay? We've heard promises and promises. Okay? And it's about time that we talk about this publicly. I know Steve had conversation with the state today, he told me about, that said it's on the way. Okay? Grant agreements. Not that we'll agree with what it says, but grant agreements are on the way. So, you know, with that, I'm trying to be optimistic yet, but it's getting harder every day. We've been battling this thing. I was up during the state fair. Met with both Commissioner Peterson, Secretary of Ag was there, Senator Klobuchar, Senator Smith, talked with them. Everybody asked, how's your situation going after High Life? And I was honest with them. We haven't seen any dollars yet. Anything anybody can do to help us out, we'd appreciate it. You know, and so we had that conversation. And finally, I was glad you asked today because, you know, it should be on the way. That's as close as we can get because you got apartments up there that are not completed and they want to get done. We don't want to get hit with a bankruptcy thing with that outfit. You know, I think there's potential. And I look at the potential for that, for the buildings. I think they will be utilized. And I think that I'm looking forward to hearing what Premium Iowa Pork does. I hope they utilize it to some extent, right? So them are some positives that could help us. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. There's still a lot to do, right? And I think we got to move on. Let's get back to the levy, which I hope can stay at that.
I'm still of the opinion that our taxes are too high in Windom. a 5, 6, 7% increase a year doesn't sound like a whole lot, but after a few years, that's a lot of money. I know my house payment went up $150, mostly because of taxes. I can't keep doing this. There's a lot of other people in town that can't either. I understand that this is a maximum that we can increase it is at 5.7%. And hopefully we're gonna be considerably less than that, but that's where I'm coming from. I guess when I run for election, that was my big factor that I brought up in what I was saying at that time. Our taxes are too high. We just cannot keep doing this.
Jim, you got your finger on the button.
Yeah, but I don't know what the alternative is. I mean, what do you do? I mean, if you want fire protection, you want police protection, you want streets, you want, even the library, I mean, it gets used. What do you do? I mean, but I'm a firm believer that until I get the money in my hand, I don't have it either. Just like they say it's coming. Well, yeah, I'm sure it is, but well, I hope they don't send it, by the mail or the, direct deposit for everything else, But yeah, and I just don't know what the alternative is. We may have to cut some places that we don't want to cut. Some places we've looked at before and haven't done, but it might happen now.
So, Jim, what kind of things would you cut? Anybody have any ideas? I bet you don't even want to share your thoughts.
Don't even go there. I mean, no, because I'll probably need police protection then.
No, but police protection can't be touched.
No, I will need it.
Oh, he would need it. I see. But you know what? If you look at what goes to your taxes, okay? It's not water, it's not sewer, it's not electric, it's not those type of entities that we own and operate. The big ones. We have amenities. Tell me what some of the amenities are. You hate even to say it. Right?
I hate to say it, but they might have to start swimming in Cottonwood Lake.
Okay. And we have an arena. And we have a community center. We've talked about improving things around City Hall here. But that's just special things. And there's other amenities. What other ones do we have? Who wants to cut any of them? Do you want to cut one, Dennis? So your taxes go to zero? I don't. No. I don't want you to lose the amenities, but that's why it's so difficult. And when you look again at tax rate, it justifies that the council for the past at least 8 years has done their due diligence on keeping that tax rate a positive factor. So, and I applaud city staff for doing a lot of that hard work to do that. When I got my taxes on my house, yeah, but my valuation went up by $50,000. My taxes went up to $150 or whatever. Okay, I get that, but my house is worth more. What I'm looking forward to is when we get the evaluations, not probably this year, but in 2 years, when they start going down, because they're going to, if we don't have a big business in town, they're going to start heading south. And then you're going to be paying less. So, anyway, that's my spill. Council, and Dennis, I appreciate your your comments, but we got to get going with this this
Yeah, I
decision.
guess, we got to be at a starting point, and that's where we're at now, so. We're gonna get the opportunity to look at everything and during the budget session, so. We'll go from there.
So are you going to make the motion to make this the preliminary levy?
I'm not going to, no.
Okay.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Thank you, Jim, for making a motion to approve the 5.71 preliminary levy, and Jenny for that second. Any discussion or final comments? Scott?
Just as everybody in the city of Windom complains about their taxes going up, and just like Mary Jones said, what entities do you guys want to give up? Are we willing to give up? Or where do we want to cut the taxes? We got some tough decisions between us guys and gals. What has to be cut? What has to be made possible? We know our main ones are what's going to take care of the city of Windom. The extras, we're going to have to, during our budgets, figure out what we want to do and where we want to save it. And if we have to cut some departments or some entities, that's just one thing we're going to have to start doing, because everybody in the city agrees that we're paying way too many taxes. But it has to come from somewhere. We have to fund our city, and our taxes is the only one rate where we get our money. So we got to, as city people, as citizens of Windom, we got to figure out what we want to do here. Because I've heard it also where people are saying we're paying way too much, and Windham's one of the higher costs of taxes. But if you guys want to help us out, figure out where we want to cut this stuff, feel free to let us know so we know. Because, I mean, we're stuck right here. We owe a lot of money, and our coffee's cups are awful small, and we ain't getting much coming in and going out. But just give us a word, give us where we want to do with this stuff. So we need some help, please.
I hear tell all the time, everybody complains about how high our taxes are, but if you really look at it, we're much lower than most places. Comparable cities this size, a lot of them are a lot higher. So although I feel bad for us, I feel pretty bad for them also, because they got to explain it. They've got to do the cuts. They've got to come up with and I don't know how in the world the state got an $80 billion surplus, but maybe that's gone too. I don't know. But
A lot of good points. Okay, we've got the motion and a second. Any further discussion? Good comments from everybody. All in favor signify by saying aye.
That resolution.
Oh, I'm sorry, the resolution is in there. The resolution has been introduced by Jim and seconded by Jenny. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Benson,
Yes.
Quaid,
Yes.
Nelson,
yes,
Grunig, Esplin.
Yes, for now.
Thank you. Fair enough. Okay, folks, we have. What's that? Yeah, it's a mayor appointment. This is to the hospital board. I'm recommending Rick Frederickson, Pastor Rick Frederickson, works out of Good Sam, and he has agreed that he would take that position. And I will apologize to Dr. Fisher. I was not able to reach him. I did try actually prior to the council meeting, because honestly I forgot to contact him. I was going to discuss that with him. I have talked to the hospital administrator. She's aware of it, and I'm sure shared with him, but I apologize, Dr. Fisher. But I still do recommend that appointment.
I'll second.
Motion and a second by Jenny to approve the appointment of Rick Frederickson. That's a full term, isn't it, or not? Nope, term expires 4/30/25. So, 2 year. Okay. Any questions? All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? And that motion carries. contractor payment and change orders. We got a truck garage, and I asked the question prior to this coming up, is the two change orders that you're going to see coming for number one and number two, they are not included in this pay request. Pay request, service payment number 3 is $249,154.30. The project looked like it is coming along pretty well. What do you say?
Yeah, no, it's moving right along. A little bit of delays on steel, but we're going to get a lot of concrete apron poured this week. Firewall is going to get built, and they're going to start building it from the inside out because the roof steel has been delayed. So, due to labor shortages, we were told.
Okay. Jason's recommendation, along with his department, is recommending approval of service payment number 3.
I'll make a motion to make payment number 3.
Motion Scott, second Dennis, to approve that payment to Wilcon Construction. Payment number 3, $249,154.30. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Any opposed? And that motion carries. Change order, increase in door frame size. You must have found a truck that was too big.
No, actually, it was a slight oversight in design from the engineer. They spec'd a 6-inch wall. Our walls are 8-inch walls, so they had to make some tin wider for all the doors. So it was just a little bit of labor there and a little bit of material to make that correction. So,
Have you ever tried sending those mistakes to the engineer, the bills?
have
No.
not.
No, it doesn't work. I'll save you the hassle. Is there a motion to approve change order number 1?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Jenny made the motion to approve change order number 1 for $580 to Wilcon, and Scott made the second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Change order number 2, additional work to remove foundation and debris. This one's a little bit more in the amount of $32,901. What's up with that one?
Well, that was all that concrete that they removed underneath the truck garage. There was the cooling towers from the old coal power plant. Maybe mentioned earlier, we did some soil borings in that area, and somehow we managed to miss all of that concrete. So,
Who told them where to drill the holes?
engineers.
Right, yeah, engineers. Okay, understood.
So, I mean, the original change order came back a little higher. There was a little bit of errors on some of the amounts that the contractor could mark up, because you get to mark up a certain percentage. That was corrected, and this is our new amount that came back. And we double-checked all receipts from the landfill, which is a good majority of the cost. Unfortunately, we couldn't get rid of it anywhere else because of the massive amounts of 1-inch, 3/4-inch rebar that was everywhere through it. So,
Okay. We have Wilcon's change order number 2 in front of us.
I'll make a motion to approve the change order number 2.
I'll second.
Motion by Jenny, second by Jim to approve change order number 2. Any final discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? And that carries. Anything else for us? Any news coming up? Any shutdowns or anything?
transmission lines coming along. Railroad has put a screeching halt to some of our work. We can't cross the railroad because they cannot provide us flaggers until October 2nd. So most of the transmission side is done. They're going to pull in a little bit of wire. Tonight we are switching over 2 underground risers that come down off the old transmission poles. So over by like GDF and then O'Reilly's. So the guy started 15 minutes ago on switching those over. So
Well, that's a good idea, doing it at night when the railroad's not watching.
Well, these aren't railroad concerned ones.
Oh,
These are late night ones, so businesses didn't have to close. So the work can be done in the dark. It takes a little bit longer, but less inconvenience. So
yep, okay, sounds good, thank you. New business. Steve, anything come up? Nothing? Old business? Council comments, Scott?
Again, I want to ask the citizens of Windom if you guys can figure out what we can do as far as how to save taxes, what entities we can do without, or how we can manage this. We sure would like some help, but do appreciate all the work that people are doing to come up with as far as our city heads and all the people that work for the city of Windom to save the money that we can save, but do appreciate everything everybody's doing. Thank you very much.
Jenny?
Okay, I have a few things. I'm a part of the Southwest Regional Development Commission that the City Council put me on, and I just wanted to say that I attended their annual meeting in July where they were celebrating 50 years of service, and I even got my picture in the little book, so if you want to see the annual report, my picture is in there even to prove I was there. But that's been a good commission. I've learned a lot being on there, and I feel like it takes you many of years of sitting there to even get a handle on all the different things that they talk about and all the different projects that they're a part of. So that is good. I also attended the ribbon cutting for the new lion shelter at Cottonwood Lake last weekend. And I think that had pretty good attendance for their pork chop feed that they did out there. And I listened to the band, and it was very good. I was concerned how, having kind of like a metal building and how bands and music would sound, but it actually was very good. I've been down to Cottonwood Lake when they've had bands just outside across from where the shelter house or the bathhouse is to the lake, and I've had it where it's echoed off of there, and so it doesn't sound as good. However they kind of tiered down their ceiling, I think that helped, and the band sounded really good. So. And the shelter is beautiful. If you haven't been up there to look around and see the bathrooms and their kitchen area and the stage that they built in there, it's a really nice facility that here eventually will be donated over to the city. But just to say that was a very nice event to attend. And then I also just attended at noon today the Cottonwood County had their public cannabis meeting. They had on the ordinance. They had that at noon today, and then there was another meeting tonight during our council meeting. There wasn't too many that attended from the public at the noon meeting, so I'm not sure how their evening one went. But I did get a copy of what they're looking at, and there wasn't a whole lot of comments, like I said. And this is something that I think future, as the council, will need to look at whether I think once Cottonwood County would adopt their ordinance, looking at as city council, if we adopt and say we're going to just mirror what they have, or if we're going to tweak it a little for the city, that's something we can do. But I think at this point we just kind of see what the county does when they bring this forward. Then we go from there. It'll be a good guideline and move forward at that point. And then again, just my appreciation to law enforcement. I just can't say that enough, that I really appreciate all of them that come to work every day and just dedicate, to come in and protect us, not even thinking of their own safety, just amazes me. So thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Jim?
Yeah, I guess I have to agree with Jenny. Scott, your guys you got enough of them now, or not enough probably, and you've all been trained, but you just never know. I mean, the guy that quick, and that's a small town too. So just keep up the good work, and you guys have done good.
Thank you, Jim. Good comments. Dennis?
I have nothing.
Steve?
Just to touch on what you talked about in the budget stuff, We did hear from Commissioner Peterson today. They are keeping tabs on what's happening in St. Paul, and we're hoping to see a grant agreement shortly. We've been unfortunately hearing it'll be here right away as far back as August. Like Jim, I will believe it when I see it. But I am trying to remain optimistic and hopeful. But those dollars will come in very, very handy to especially help us out with our wastewater. So,
Very good. You guys said it all. We're adjourned by unanimous consent. Thank you.